Welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host, Cyrus, where we talk about complex metaphysical, spiritual, and life after death related subjects, which some of you all like, apparently. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you're on this page, maybe you're into this kind of stuff. And tonight, we're going down the rabbit hole because I opened up my Facebook and I was introduced to a concept that was posted on the Facebook group called Light Workers of the World. And it's one of those Matrix memes with Morpheus. And it goes, what if I told you that not everyone's higher selves are of pure love, and many of these higher selves or group soul collectives, if you want to, that's one way of looking at it, are actually malevolent in their origins. As you could predict, a very controversial statement like this led to a lot of fighting, but also a lot of very interesting, unusual points of view that I have not been exposed to before. So we're going to hash this concept out a little bit in this video. Before we go fully into this, if you're new around here and you like this kind of thing, please hit the subscribe button down below. This helps keep the channel going. You can punch that like button, share the video, hit the notification bell. All of these things tell YouTube that the channel is relevant. If nobody does these things, then you can actually see on my analytics. So if I go for a period without getting subscribers, YouTube stops recommending the video to other people on YouTube. So my traffic goes like, wah. So if you want to keep the channel alive, please subscribe to continue. So this post, it is very controversial, and there's a few kind of takeaway points about this, because what's really interesting is a synchronicity, which is that I had been thinking about this concept the last couple of days. And then I pull up my Facebook, and in here on this group is this topic coming up. And I will say that I tend to avoid, not avoid, but I'm a little bit hesitant of many esoteric groups on Facebook if it's not the ones that I know are well moderated and facilitate real meaningful discussions. This includes all of the afterlife groups that I know of on Facebook. So that's Evidence for an Afterlife, Proof of Life After Death, Realms of the Afterlife, Life After Death 101, Afterlife Research Symposium, and of course Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. So these groups I know tried and tested and true for being excellent locations to discuss complex things. But there's a lot of new agey groups, groups about spirituality, and groups that delve a little bit too much into the conspiracy world for my liking. You start getting the flat earthers and some of the kind of extreme end of the globalist conspiracies. Everyone's out to get us, that kind of thing. So I'm a little bit hesitant about getting involved in some of these other groups, but then sometimes a very interesting discussion pops up, like in this light worker group. So I've been ruminating about this concept because I was thinking to myself, okay, so we've dealt in past videos about people like Rob Schwartz, who insists that you can commit genocide in this world, and then you die, you're immediately an angel floating around in heaven. And then we can cite 20 different sources of much more legitimate spirit info than basically some dude's ideas who's popular and has a book and shows up on daytime TV shows, to refute that concept and show that there is individual consequences for actions. But then we also know about the group soul. So you can be an individual person, but your mind is connected to a collective of similar souls, and you combine all of those together to become one kind of unit of consciousness, and this becomes what we call the higher self. The higher self is connected to you and all of your kind of cousin souls that we could also call incarnations, other incarnations. And then we might encounter this during a near-death experience. The higher self itself may appear in the form of a light or what you're most comfortable with, so it may take the form of a deity. Whatever it is that it can use to help introduce itself to its lesser version of itself, which is you. But how do we know that these group souls are entirely on a positive spectrum? So somebody like Hitler, surely somebody who has a desire to create genocide and mayhem, maybe Pol Pot is another example, or Stalin, Saddam Hussein. Surely they are not just completely rogue souls. Their higher soul must have some affiliation with the decisions that they're making to be so evil. Would this mean that a higher self, a group soul collective itself, may be corrupt in nature, may be spreading darkness versus light? Is that possible? Well, no one's ever talked about it before, and we don't really know, but many would disagree and say no, because they have experiences with the higher self, and they come to discover that it is pure love and light and positivity. But I'm not so sure if this really precludes this concept, because what if an entity can be both light and love and positivity, and yet also be on a darker mission to, I guess, create polarity and create darkness, because that's part of its design mission goal, is to stir up chaos as a way of balancing the light with the dark, creating that contrast. That's kind of the discussion we see happening on this thread. So there's a few good posts I'll highlight here. So Antonio talks about how even so, so Christine says this is rubbish. So this battle was fought long ago and won by the light side. And Antonio is basically saying there is a permanent war going on between light and dark. It is the contrasting nature of the universe. And if the dark wins, then humanity remains at the bottom tier of the spiritual world and isn't able to move on to other greater levels of consciousness. So we can keep going. Big discussion there. I wanted to highlight. So Matt said something interesting. He said, I was watching someone on YouTube explain that we have multiple higher selves in different dimensions. Half are in one density and the other half are in the light. So it's like a big chain of evolution leading up to source. Antonio says, exactly, we have different versions of our higher selves that exist in multiple dimensions all at once, multidimensionally. Extremely important point, I think, because we think of just this one higher self that, that is, overruling our life. If we fail to see that there, under multidimensional theory, there could be many versions of our higher self. There could be many versions of our own lives, and we could have different higher selves following us on different paths. It's so complicated, difficult to figure out, but when we throw multiple dimensions into the mix, the higher self may not be quite as conformist as we may like to believe. Then we had an interesting post by, let's see if I can find it. I should have taken note. Okay, the other post I was thinking of, I can't seem to find it, but basically the gist of the conversation that I saw further down was that, we may interpret these negative actions or corrupted actions or something that we would interpret as negative, and working from this higher vantage point, a higher self may be embodying those things because in its mind it's doing the right thing, because again it's adding the polarity, it's being the villain. It's being kind of what we might call like a dark angel. So it's a group soul that could be embodying negative dark entities, because that's its mission, is to again create that polarity. So we have in our mind this idea of the higher self and the group soul again being a completely conformist concept. So all of them look like white lights, and all of them are based purely in love and peace and bliss and eternal bliss and harmony. And then when we begin reading these near-death experiences, it starts to seem like every single higher self and group soul is identical. But I really don't think that's the case. I think that there is this unbelievable amount of diversity and difference between entities that exist on all levels of the spectrum. And as a result of this, it's almost like we have no comprehension of just how complicated it all goes. So there may be group souls or higher selves that encompass specific concepts or ideas. And then they're working with other group souls, all of which encompasses, I guess, the big tapestry of creation. And maybe perhaps by definition, then, in this kind of crazy model of reality, then maybe there has to be these dark angels. There has to be these dark group souls that, in their quote perfection, they are in fact extremely imperfect, and they are adding this weird kind of balance to the universe by encompassing the Pol Pots and the Hitlers and the Stalins, or who knows. So so that this would answer the conundrum of how can somebody who's a genocidal maniac or a serial killer exist if every soul embodied comes from this piece of like a perfect entity, a higher self, a group soul. Well, what if that group soul itself isn't from the most positive spectrum? And how do we interpret this information? If it's true, maybe it's not true. Maybe this is just purely philosophy and has nothing to do with real life. I don't know. If this is true, how do we interpret that? Well, I don't think we should go the moral relativist route, because obviously that leads nowhere fast. So we can't say, oh, bless Hitler, bless Stalin, bless Pol Pot for butchering and slaughtering people, for it's all part of God's plan. I think that if there are antagonist group souls, I think that there's still a problem. I think if you have to choose what side of the spectrum you're going to be on, and if you value knowledge over confusion, love over hatred, peace over warfare, and you see how messed up our planet has been for thousands of years, then that means that that you will need to decide which part of the polarity you're on. And if you're not sided with the negative spectrum, then you have to basically, by definition, be somebody who fights it or is reconciling that energy. And perhaps being aware that there are higher powers at work possibly that regulate the darkness and regulate the evil. So even if on the biggest spectrum level, these entities are working from a place, a part of like God's quote love, they are still working. They're still utilizing the tools of darkness and evil, which means we have to be opposed to those entities. Now, I've heard a lot more about this topic come up when we talk about the, quote, Luciferian group soul. And so I saw some stuff, I think it was on the Collective Evolution webpage, about the Luciferian group soul, which goes straight into this topic, very deep stuff, alleged communications, alleged channelings, things like that, discussing how this dark group soul operates and basically enslaves our planet in various ways. And again, it goes into these same concepts. Could something that is managing evil energies in this higher perspective not be evil on top, and yet we have to deal with all the chaos and evil that it's creating? And I also dealt with this concept in a series of fiction novels I have written, but I have not published. They're kind of steampunk fantasy style novels, and the second novel introduces a villain that is operating on this basis. And I just haven't released those books yet. So hopefully in the future, you may see those pop up on Amazon or maybe even a bookstore. All right, that's it for this video. Really complicated stuff. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. You can get involved by checking out some of my books like Understanding Life After Death and The Afterlife and Beyond, which released a few months ago. And you can find those links down in the description, afterlifetopics.com as well. Or you can get involved in the classes to help support the channel. So anybody who donates $30 or more a month, then I get them involved in these big group discussions on the private class channel. So we do classes twice a week, and it's like a real class academy. We have a curriculum, and we have weekly subjects about topics like this one. So if you want to support the work I do and help keep me fed while I do all this stuff, then that's one way to get involved. I'll see you all on the next video. Got a couple more coming up for you guys in just a few minutes, so stay tuned.